Hi, my name is Lynn, and thank you for joining me today. I will be making a couple of cards using Pink and Main's May 2021 Crafty Courtyard box kit, and this one is called Butterfly Kisses. In this video, I'm going to focus on actually using the stencil that we got in the kit. It's this really lovely all over butterfly silhouette pattern, and the stencil itself is 6x6, but I'm actually making a US A2 size card. So I have already cut down one of the pattern papers. It's one of the ones that has sort of that kind of that bokeh effect to it, and this is sort of the closest purple that I have to the purple that's on this paper, which isn't a really superb match because this is Seedless Preserve, which is a little bit more reddish of a purple as opposed to the pattern paper, which is a little bit more bluish of a purple. But I think in the end it worked out okay. So you'll see in a bit, and maybe you can let me know if if it turned out okay. But I really love this pattern, and I was actually inspired by one of the cards that actually came in the kit that has a sort of the same spattering of random butterflies over a another pattern paper. So I drew some inspiration from that in order to make that first panel. And here I'm cleaning off my stencil, but I'm cleaning it off onto another piece of card. And in fact, I'm actually inking right onto a second card base. So it's a little bit difficult to do this because I'm using a little baby wipe to wipe the ink off of the stencil and intentionally kind of pushing it into those open areas of the stencil so that it inks up my card. But my baby wipe was getting snagged quite a bit on the stencil because I think there are some pretty sharp edges on the stencil, so it was a little challenging, but I made it work. And what's great about this is that you get sort of a 2-for-1. You get to clean your stencil, and then you get a second background to use. So I love that. And I'm just gonna take some more ink and ink the edges just to make it look a little bit more distressed around the edges, but also to darken it a little so that your eye is naturally drawn inwards to the center where it's a little bit lighter. So really beautiful stencil. Obviously there are so many different ways of using it, so I'm just choosing a couple. And you know, the pro and con of double-sided pattern paper is that every time I flip it over and I see another beautiful print, I always cringe just a little bit when I have to put tape over it. But what is nice about it is that we do get enough so that you can use every single pattern if you wanted. So you don't have to worry about that. So what I'm going to do here is I was designing a little bit on the fly. If I had it to do over again, I would have stamped this first before putting it on my card base, but no worries. All I did was just mask it off. I've used the stretch of tape a few times, so I know it's fairly, it's lost a lot of its tackiness, so it's not going to tear up my card base for sure. And I'm just going to ink up half of my butterfly because I'm only going to stamp that one floral half. So the stamp is so large that, you know, if you use the full stamp, then it really does take up a substantial amount of space on your card front, but because you have the two very distinct halves, you can always just use half. And I was going to attempt to stamp again because, as you can see, my first impression is not very good. I chose to use StazOn because the pattern paper does have a little bit of a coating to it, and so I thought that I would need StazOn, and I thought that might be enough to give me a really good impression, but it didn't. And so I'm thinking a little bit about how I'm gonna fix this, and taking the time to also clean off my stamp because I don't like to leave stays on my stamps. So what I'm going to eventually do here is this seems like a disaster, but sometimes when things like this happen, I just sort of embrace the imperfection. But in this case, I thought that I can actually save this stamping. So I pulled out my black glaze pen and I'm just going to trace over everything. So it's really not that hard to do, as it turns out, because there was enough ink that made it onto the page to make it so that it was actually easy to trace over, because it sort of has some ink already there that I could just follow those lines and stay on them and not kind of make new ones. And as it turns out, I initially was just going to kind of go over some of the lines that didn't ink very well, but then in looking at it, thought, well, it looks very inconsistent if I only did that. So then I just decided that I'm going to trace over all the lines. And in the end, it actually looks really fantastic because a black glaze pen has that sort of glossy, shiny look. So it almost looks like it has been embossed even. And I am able to kind of add just like a little bit more detail here and there with my pen. And so, in the end, I think it actually turned out really well, and you would never have known that it was a terrible first stamping. So if you do have a black glaze pen in your arsenal, there's a tip for another way you can use it. It can really save the day on a bad stamp job. So here I just have a piece of scrap black paper, and I've already powdered it with, I just happen to use baby powder, and I'm going to white heat emboss my sentiment on here. And I really love the font. It's so thin and kind of curvy and delicate that I was worried about getting a good emboss on it, but it embosses really, really well. So it turned out just fantastic. And I'm gonna trim this down so that I can get it really kind of as small as I can, because I want the rest of the card to really shine, especially the butterfly, because it's just so pretty. But even that is pushed off to the side a little bit so that our pattern paper and our stenciling almost becomes more of a focal point. And even though there's a lot going on in that background, I think it's an easy way to just build up all that texture is to stencil right over your pattern paper. And I'm going to be definitely doing more of that, because I never would have thought to do that if it weren't for the fact that I saw a pattern paper. I mean, there's actually two pattern papers. There's one that's just plain burlap pattern, and then there's a second one that has that same burlap pattern, but with the all over butterfly print. And I actually use that pattern paper in another card of mine. So if you want to check that out, that's in a separate video. But here's the that extra panel that I got when I cleaned off my stencil, and I learned from the first time, and I actually pulled out my stamp positioning tool. This is Crafter's Companion 8x8 stamping platform, and it's pretty great. I like that it's a straight up and down stamp, as opposed to the hinge style of stamping platform. And I like the size of this. It's a nice 8x8, and it will accommodate some of those larger background stamps. So I've been using that more and more, but sometimes I just don't bother pulling it out. Now, I don't know what exactly happened, but I did lose a little bit of footage, because after this, it seemed like my, I think my memory card just got full, and I thought I was still recording, but I wasn't. So here's a recap of my 2 cards. This is the first card, and I did finish it up with some embellishments that did come in the kit. I used some of the holographic butterflies and some of the silver sequins that came in the kit. This is the second one that you didn't get to see me finish, but essentially is the same as the first one. I just attached the Dream Big sentiment on some foam and created a spattering of both pink and the holographic butterflies. So those are the 2 cards that I made in this craft session using the stencil that came in the Pink and Main kit. I do have other videos where I use other tools in the kit, so if you'd like to see more inspiration, feel free to check those out. Thank you again for joining me, and until my next video, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye!